Now that our country has a political party whose leaders seem to have a really hard time trying to tell Nazis to go screw themselves. A Nazi is anyone who would literally praise Hitler, because there was only one Hitler. And he was the person who, let me be clear about this, took over the Nazi Party, because the Nazi Party was actually a creation of Dietrich Eckart. It's just that Dietrich Eckart saw Hitler and then decided to elevate him and turn him into exactly what Hitler became. So, when you praise Hitler, you're a Nazi. There's a part of our country that seems to be okay with that. And the reason why they were okay with people praising Hitler is because Hitler-like behaviors, Hitler-like positions, Nazi-like positions were tolerated and not confronted for more than a decade. It was not counted as an absolute no-no. So it's time for us to ask the questions. What was the pure legal reasoning of the Holocaust? What really, not just hatred of Jews or anti-Semitism, what was like the governing philosophy that was the centerpiece of all of the wickedness of the Nazi? And I will answer that. Citizenship and illegal immigration. Why? You see, they created what the Nazis did when they came to power, before they created the Nuremberg laws. They were trying to build up people's hatred towards Jews and people who were of lesser races. Inside of Germany at that time, Germany's population was around 66 million people when the Nazis took over. Inside of that nation, there were maybe they say under 6,000, maybe less, of black people. And they were all killed and sterilized. As the Nazis were beginning to do their experimentation and planning of how they were going to approach their method of achieving the goals that Dietrich Eckart described, that became the religious principles of the German Christians that preached Nazi philosophy, Nazis' religious philosophy. And the Nazis' religious philosophy was basically, I'm just going to say, it was a continuation of the institution of slavery. It was, all this thing about white people, right? But Dietrich Eckart took it to another level. He invented the term Aryan. And the Aryans were Atlanteans and pure. These were the true Germans. These were the highest of all. These were the actual chosen people. These were who were supposed to rule the world. They were the people who were basically the fighters of the highest righteous of causes of this world, and the rest of the world was ill-informed and living inside of the lies of Satan. And the biggest evils of that were obviously the Jews, because they were the false chosen people. They were the chosen people of the false God. They were, and black people were just one rung above that. And that's why those few thousand Africans were slaughtered. Now, why were they able to be slaughtered? Because Nazi Germany was dealing with immigration. And they started designating groups of individuals as no longer fit to be German citizens, because that's ultimately what the race laws were about. Whether or not you were a German, a true German. Because a true German were the descendants of the chosen. The Aryans, the Atlanteans, the people who were supposed to be able to rule the world, the people that lived in the highest ideals of everything. And so everyone who fell outside of that definition were nothing. And that ultimately led to the Nuremberg Laws. What the Nuremberg Laws did is it basically took every single Jew and any other groups that they felt that were potentially threats, and they rendered them as being illegals. The Jew was the primary one, because the Jews were responsible for all the evils of mankind. That was the position of Dietrich Eckart and what would become the position of the entire Nazi Party. Every single evil that could possibly exist was because of the Jew. That was their philosophy. And black people were one rung above that. And that was because in August, one of the reasons why they had that is because in August of 1904, Germany committed its first genocide. It took a group called the Herero and the Nama, which were African tribes, in August of 1904, and they committed a genocide, killed over an estimated 100,000 Africans by literally starving them to death in a camp. Those soldiers and those people who gave those orders and those principles were still evident inside of German society as the Nazis took over. So it was kind of conditioned to be able to do that. But you have to remember, the centerpiece of what was the beginning was deportation. Because that's what they were trying to do. Kick out all the Jews. Kick out all the Jews. Doesn't matter. Send them everywhere. That's why we had the boats full of Jews showing up in New York Harbor. Because there were millions of Jews, and they all had to go, and they had to go wherever it could go to, and it just became impossible. Because every single Jew in Germany needed to leave because of the Nuremberg Law. Because they were declared as illegal, and everything that they had, everything that they possessed, was to be stripped from them as they were deported. Whatever assets that they had were to be left behind and given to the truly enlightened and elite. That sounds a lot like some people who are in the Republican Party that want this like mass deportation thing. That there is this higher, more noble, more enlightened American, right? And that deport all these illegals and get rid of all these substandard people. And what do you do with their property and their possessions? You leave them behind because they're supposed to, because that is supposed to reduce housing prices and that sort of thing, because you have millions of more homes that are available, more apartments to be rented, more things of that nature. That was basically the position of the Republican Party. That mass deportation would lower costs because there would be less people. So this is kind of the beginning of where these Hitler lovers would be educating you, because mass deportation is what the Nuremberg Laws were. Then when it came to the Holocaust and Heydrich writing the final solution, the problem that they had that he was asked to solve was an immigration problem. And Hitler was telling him, I don't know what we're going to do with all these Jews that are still out there, because those nations, they have their definition of Jew, but we created a definition of Jew inside of the Nuremberg Laws. Because the Nuremberg Laws didn't just create a definition of Jew, it created a definition of Jew that could be applied to a broader number of people who potentially could be a threat to the Nazi philosophy. And they were deported. But when it came that there were going to be tens of millions of Jews that they knew and that they had their higher standard of what it meant to be a Jew, that they had to kill them. They had to get rid of them. Heydrich's first concept was to send them to Madagascar, because it was an illegal immigration deportation problem. What to do with all the illegal immigrants that they considered were illegal in the nations that they conquered. And then they kicked them out. You see, they kept trying to do it. And that's ultimately what the Holocaust was. The Holocaust, at the end of the day, was just simply an approach to mass deportation of what they classified as an illegal immigrant when they first wrote the Nuremberg laws. Please remember this. And please remember this. They looked at lesser people. So if you're a black Republican, just remember, look it up. Look what the Nazis did to black people. The black citizens of their country, they were all sterilized and killed because there were only a few thousand of them. No one knew those people. So who cares if they were sterilized and killed? In a country of 66 million, 6,000 people do not even show up on the radar screen. And then what they did in Africa. How can, with the knowledge that the Republican Party has people who are the personal advisors of lawmakers and leadership, who are Nazi lovers, are trying to teach about mass deportation when you understand that the Holocaust, at the end of the day, was a mass deportation strategy? And so was the Nuremberg laws, to redefine the citizenship, what is to be the citizenship of what is to be a German. That is trying to be done here, because we have people whispering into the ears of lawmakers who are Hitler lovers, who are trying to develop an immigration and deportation and citizenship standard, which is insane. So yes, if you hear people talking favorably about Nazis, you have to confront them. You don't tolerate them. You don't try to understand them, because there is nothing that they want to hear from you. If they truly believe in Nazi ideology, they believe that they are the highest, most divine people to walk the face of the earth, that their divine responsibility is at the end of their rapture. They're the people who are supposed to rule the world. They are the chosen. They are the people who get blinked off the earth and sent into heaven while we all suffer or whatever, and then they come down. They're the warriors. That's what World War II was. World War II and the Nazi philosophy essentially became that the Nazis, in their Christian sect of the Nazis, which is what we have to realize, the Nazis is a Christian cult that believes that Aryans, people look like me, are divine and we're supposed to rule the entire world because that's the only way the true Christ comes, and everyone's Bible is wrong because it was written by liars. It was written by corrupt people. Parts of it may be true, but the whole of it is not. They will take segments of it, and the rest of it doesn't matter, because it was written by corrupt people, by the corrupt lesser races, like blacks and Jews. And they have the divine truth because they're Aryans. Please, confront Nazis, confront people who praise Hitler, and confront the politicians of whom had these people in their ranks, and understand we need to make certain that their approach to immigration is not the Hitler approach to immigration, because that was bad. Simple. Like, subscribe, debate, argue with me. Thank you.